Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. I hope you all are well and doing great. So today I am back with another video to continue our UCAT test preparation. As you guys already know that we have started the fourth type of decision making and we have completed our 6 questions of this type. So if you have any confusions in the last questions, you can ask me in the comment sections. If you didn't watch our last videos of verbal reasoning questions and the 3 types of decision making, you can watch all the videos in this channel. Okay, so without any further delay, let's start our next question. And the first question of this video, which says, no water in any tropical ocean is as biologically diverse as in this region. As a local response of the ocean to the surfer wind, the warmer nutrient depleted surface water is replaced by the dense upwelling water that rises up to take its place. The speculation about the association of cooler waters with the enhanced growth of phytoplankton gained ground when the chemical analysis of the water from the western coast of the region confirmed a high concentration of dissolved gases along with nutrients like nitrates, phosphates, and silicates. Phytoplankton uses the light harvesting pigment chlorophyll and forms the base of several aquatic food webs. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. First conclusion says that upwelling makes the ocean water more fertile. Second, phytoplankton is a food source for some marine animal species. Third, tropical western coast may be not a good region for fishing. Warmer water is pushed away from the surface over limited marine zones. The abundance of phytoplankton in the region is directly related to ocean temperature. So the first conclusion, which says upwelling makes the ocean water more fertile, it does follow the statement of the question, because the passage states that upwelling water is cooler as it replaces the warmer surface water, and that cooler water contains high concentrations of dissolved nutrients and gases. We can therefore conclude that upwelling makes the ocean water more fertile. So because of this reason, the first conclusion does follow the statement. So we will drag a yes and drop it here. Next we have the second conclusion, which says phytoplankton is a good food source for some marine animal species. It does follow because the last sentence of the passage states that phytoplankton is at the base of some aquatic food webs. So it is a food source for marine animal species within that aquatic food web. So again it's a yes, as it does follow the statement of the question, so we will drop a yes. Third conclusion, it does not follow because the passage states that phytoplankton is in abundance in water from the western coast of the region, as it is a major food source for submarine life. There would most probably be a high fish population in this area. So the third conclusion does not follow, so we will drag a no and drop it here. Next we have a fourth conclusion. It does follow because the passage states that as a local response, the warmer water is replaced by cooler upwelling water. So the fourth conclusion does follow, so we will drag a yes and drop it here. The last conclusion, which says the abundance of phytoplankton in the region is directly related to ocean temperature. So the fifth conclusion does not follow because the passage states that cooler upwelling water supports the growth of phytoplankton, which means that the abundance of phytoplankton is inversely, not directly related to ocean temperature. So the fifth conclusion does not follow. That's why we will drag a no and drop it here. Next question we have question number 8, which says a radio interview was broadcast yesterday involving a person who made anonymous allegations about a support person who had used banned substances over a period of time to enhance their performance in competitions. A television news channel requested an interview, but the person making the allegations refused. After these allegations were made, the public took to social media to denounce the claims as false and to condemn the whistleblower. Public opinion appeared to be in favor of the sports person. An investigation has been set up by the relevant sports authority to investigate the claims. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So we have first conclusion, which says the whistleblower did not want their name to be made public. Second, the vast majority of the public did not believe the claims of the whistleblower. Third, the sports person is well known and popular. The whistleblower was a well known sports person. Fourth, the sports authorities have taken the claim seriously. So the first conclusion, that says the whistleblower did not want their name to be made public, it does follow because the whistleblower refused to allow the news channel to use their name. So it does follow, that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next, we have a second conclusion which says the vast majority of the public did not believe the claims of the whistleblower. It does not follow because the passage only references some members of the public on social media, not the majority of the public. So this one does not follow, that's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Third, we have the sport person is well known and popular. It does not follow because there is no information in the passage to support this conclusion. So it does not follow. Again, we will drag a no and drop it, in front of this conclusion. Fourth conclusion that says the whistleblower was a well-known sports person. It does not follow because there is no information in the passage to support this conclusion. So again it does not follow, so we will again drag a no and drop it here. Next we have a fifth conclusion which says that the special sport authorities have taken the claim seriously. It does follow, as the sports authority has set up an investigation even though public opinion is in favor of the sports person. So it does follow, that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Previous studies have estimated that the intolerance to statin, a drug which reduces the risk of heart attack, may be as high as 50%. However, new research drawing on data from more than 4 million patients worldwide suggests it to be likely below 10%. Professor Missy Brand of the Medical University of Lodz, Poland, said that most cases of statin intolerance were down to patients' expectations of side effects as a result of misinformation. He calls it a placebo effect, where people experience bodily or psychological side effects when taking a certain drug because of what they were told by their friends. Place yes if the conclusion does follow. Place no if the conclusion does not follow. First conclusion, which says 1 in 2 sufferers from heart disease will experience side effects from taking statins. Second, statins are largely ineffective in preventing heart attacks. Third, 90% of Polish cardiology patients report no side effects when taking statins as part of their treatments. Word of mouth may be to blame for reports of intolerance to statins. The placebo effect can induce negative emotional symptoms. So the first conclusion It does not follow because the latest study puts the risk of intolerance to statin at below 10%. So this one does not follow. So that's why we will drag a no and drop it in front of this box. We will drag a no and drop it here. Next we have second conclusion, which says statins are largely ineffective in preventing heart attacks. It does not follow because the passage states that statins reduce the risk of heart attacks. So this conclusion does not follow. So that's why it's a no for this too. So we will drop a no in front of this conclusion. Third conclusion, that 90% of Polish cardiology patients report no side effects when taking statins as part of the treatment. It does not follow because the passage refers to the intolerance research on 4 million patients worldwide, not just those from Poland. So the third conclusion does not follow. That's why again we will drop a no in front of it. Fourth, we have word of mouth may be to blame for reports of intolerance to statins. It does follow because the passage states that most cases of such reports come from a patient's expectations of side effects, a result of misinformation. So the fourth conclusion does follow. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Like this. Then we have a last conclusion, which one is fifth. The placebo effect can induce negative emotional symptoms. It does follow because the passage states that placebo leads patients experience psychological side effects. So this one does follow. So again we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. There you go. Then we have next question, which says for a business where a time lag of few milliseconds is not critical to its operations, a cloud platform can open up new possibilities. Beneficial for the average enterprise, cloud platforms do not require capital expenses like investments in servers and softwares, but only operational expenses. Companies that use the cloud resolve recovery issue nearly 4 times faster than other companies. Companies that do not use the cloud spend an alarming 8 hours on average recovering from data disasters, having the institutional bias of doing everything internally may prevent a large scale company from taking advantage of the cloud. Place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. A business that has activities where a time lag of a few milliseconds is critical should not use a cloud platform. Second, using a cloud platform can help a company to be more economic with its IT expenditure. Company A resolves a recovery issue faster than Company B. Company A uses a cloud platform. Companies that use the cloud spend less on IT than those that do not use it. Restoring data saved to the cloud may take on an average 4 hours less than restoring data is not backed up to the cloud. So the first conclusion, it does follow because the first sentence states that cloud platforms can open up new possibilities only for a business where a time lag of a few milliseconds is not critical to its operations. So because of this reason, the first conclusion does follow. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. Second conclusion, it does follow because cloud platforms do not require capital expenses like investments in servers and software. So IT expenditure could be reduced. So this one again does follow the statement of the question, so we will drag a yes and drop it here. Then we have a third conclusion that it does not follow because although the passage states that companies that use the cloud resolve recovery issues nearly 4 times faster, there is not enough information to conclude that all companies who resolve issues faster use the cloud. So because of this reason, a third conclusion does not follow. So we will drop a no in front of it. Fourth conclusion, which says that companies that use the cloud spend less on IT than those that do not use it. It does not follow because although the passage suggests that IT expenditure could be reduced, there is no information that proves company who use the cloud spend less on IT. So again, fourth conclusion does not follow, so we will drop a no in front of it. Fifth conclusion, it does not follow because the passage says that on average companies that do not use the cloud spend 8 hours on average covering the data, whereas using the cloud could make this 4 times faster. It therefore takes less than 4 hours on average to restore data saved to the cloud. So here we have the fifth conclusion, which does not follow the statement of the question. So we will drag a no and drop it here. So next question we have that increasingly global interconnectivity in a corporate ecosystem has focused cybersecurity efforts on external threats. Overlooking a danger lurking with organizations, with most employees failing to compartmentalize the use of their IT systems. The human factor remains not only the weakest but also the most discounted link where current and former employees either inadvertently or deliberately expose data to unauthorized sources. Reliable statistics reveal that the depth and intensity of such threats is much higher, as is their potential to pass undetected than any external breaches, shifting focus towards covering them under data security guidelines and insurance. Place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. A more holistic approach to cybersecurity standards is required. Insurance products are being designed to cover internal security breaches. Most of the cyber attacks initiated by individuals within an organization are intentional. Many employees do not distinguish between the personal and professional use of their computers. The assumption that internal cyber threats are more challenging to counter than similar external threats is not factual. So, the first conclusion that says a more holistic approach to cybersecurity standards is required. It does follow because the passage states that statistics show that internal cybersecurity threats should start to be covered under the data security guidelines. So, a more holistic approach is required. So, first conclusion does follow the statement of the question, so that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here. Second, we have that insurance products are being designed to cover internal security breaches. This one does follow because the last sentence details a shift of focus to start covering internal cybersecurity threats under guidelines and insurance. So it does follow. So again, we will drag a yes and drop it here. Third conclusion, which says most of the cyber attacks initiated by individuals within an organization are intentional. This one does not follow because employees may expose data to unauthorized sources, either inadvertently or deliberately, meaning not all exposures are intentional. So this one does not follow, so that's why we will drag a no and drop it here. Fourth conclusion, which says many employees do not distinguish between personal and professional use of their computers. It does follow because the passage states employees are failing to compartmentalize the use of their IT systems, which implies they are unable to make a distinction between personal and professional use of their computers. So this one does follow, so that's why we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this box. So the fifth conclusion, which says that it does not follow because the passage states that reliable statistics reveal that the depth and intensity of such threats is much higher. So because of this reason, we can say that the fifth conclusion does not follow the statement of the question. So we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next we have the next question, that is question number 12, which says observations of the variability of precipitation around the globe are important for understanding how climate change affects the water cycle and global energy. Satellite meteorology combines the strengths of infrared and microwave data for rainfall rate estimation. The infrared method provides a spatial and temporal resolution of 4 km and every 30 minutes respectively. This coupled with ground-based radar measurements loosely correlates cloud crop properties like temperature and textures to precipitation on the ground. Through the microwave data is not as frequently available, these radiations interact with actual precipitating particles inside the potential rain clouds, which are opaque at other frequencies. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So first conclusion we have that microwave radiation is more accurate than infrared radiation when studying the formation of rain droplets. Second, precipitating clouds are transparent to microwave radiations. Infrared data provides greater spatial coverage than microwave data. The microwave method provides precipitation data at least 50 times a day. Just like infrared and microwave satellites, weather radars are stationed in space. So let's see which conclusion does follow and which one does not. So here we have our first conclusion that microwave radiation is more accurate than infrared radiation when studying the formation of rain droplets. It does follow because the passage states that microwave data radiations interact with actual precipitating particles, whereas the infrared method loosely correlates cloud top properties to precipitation on the ground. Therefore, microwave data is more accurate than infrared data when studying the formation of rain droplets. So the first conclusion does follow the statement of the question. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here. Second conclusion says precipitating clouds are transparent to microwave radiations. It does follow because it is stated in the passage that potential rain clouds are opaque at all frequencies other than microwave radiations. So this one does follow. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. So the third conclusion, which says infrared data provides greater spatial coverage than microwave data. It, Therefore, the spatial coverage for microwave data and infrared data cannot be compared. So that's why the third conclusion does not follow. So we will drag our no and drop it in front of it. The fourth conclusion, which says that the microwave method provides precipitation data at least 50 times a day. This one does not follow because the passage states that microwave data is provided less frequently than infrared data, which provides a temporal resolution of 30 minutes, mean that it sends data every 30 minutes or 48 times a day. So we have this reason by which we can say that the fourth conclusion does not follow. So we will drag a no and drop it here. Next we have fifth conclusion, which says just like infrared and microwave satellites, weather radars are stationed in space. It does not follow because the passage states that ground-based radar measurements correlate cloud top properties, so these have to be stationed on the ground, not in space. So the fifth conclusion does not follow. That's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next, they say that many areas that were earlier available have been blocked by the development of hydroelectric dams, thereby isolating salmon from the spawning grounds. The carrying capacity of the waters that remain accessible has been diminished by increasingly warmer waters, chemicals, and the introduction of hatchery reared and non native species over time. The hatchery fish that are released as smolts to supplement the decimated wild population may carry contagious diseases. The abundance of all juvenile life stages, except the later small stage that migrates to salt water and returns to its native rivers for reproduction, is inversely proportional to the existing population density. So place yes if the conclusion does follow, and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So here we have our first conclusion, which says salmon usually spawn in the oceans. Second, hatchery juveniles arrive at the point of release as young adults. Third, the salmon farming industry has a negative impact on the native salmon population. Fourth, relatively younger hatchery juveniles are released in rivers intended for hydropower projects. Enhancing the water's carrying capacity is more effective than introducing hatched fish in restoring the salmon population. So here we have these five conclusions. So let's see which one does follow the statement of the question and which one does not. So the first conclusion, which says salmon usually spawn in the oceans, it does not follow because the passage states smolts migrate to salt water and return to their native rivers for reproduction. So this conclusion does not follow the statement of the question, so that's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Second, we have the conclusion that says hatchery juveniles arrive at the point of release as young adults. It does follow because it states that hatchery fish are released as smolts, which are a later juvenile stage or young adults. So this one does follow the statement, so that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Third conclusion says that the salmon farming in industry has a negative impact on the native salmon population, and it does follow because the passage states that hatchery reared salmon may carry contagious disease and the carrying capacity of the waters has decreased due to the introduction of hatchery reared fish. So this third conclusion does follow, so that's why we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. The fourth conclusion that says relatively younger hatchery juveniles are released in rivers intended for hydropower projects. It does not follow because the passage states that smolts are released in the rivers and smolts are older juveniles. So it does not follow the statement of the question. So that's why we will say the fourth conclusion does not follow, and we will drop a no in front of that. The last conclusion that says enhancing the water's carrying capacity is more effective than introducing hatched fish in restoring the salmon production. It does follow because it is stated in the passage that the carrying capacity of the waters has diminished and the abundance of juveniles is inversely proportional to population density, which implies that a lesser number of fish and an increase in the habitat of freshwater areas would lead to a larger wild salmon population. So the fifth conclusion does follow. So that's why we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. So here we have the table shows the results of an experiment in which seedlings of a particular plant species were transplanted after various treatments. The survival and growth of the seedlings were documented at 1 year and at 1.5 years after transplantation. So here we have some experiment results. The treatment given in 1 year after transplantation and 1.5 year after transplantation. So here we have percentage of survival and growth by centimeter. So you can take a look at these values. So place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. Both soil sterilization and inoculation enhance plant growth. Maximum growth was recorded in the last 6 months of the experiments. The survival rate is the highest when seedlings are grown in sterilized soil and are inoculated. Maximum growth was recorded for seedlings that were grown in sterilized soil but were not inoculated. Some seedlings that were grown in non-sterilized soil died after a year of transplantation. So the first conclusion that says both soil sterilization and inoculation enhance plant growth, it does follow because the last row of the table indicates that when both treatments were provided, the growth recorded was the highest. Therefore, it can be concluded that both soil sterilization and inoculation enhance plant growth. So this one does follow, so that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here. The second conclusion, it does follow because for each of the 3 sets of treatments, growth was much higher between 1 year and 1.5 years after transplantation compared to the total growth 1 year after transplantation. So the second conclusion does follow. So again we will drag a yes and drop it here. The third conclusion, it does not follow because the survival rate was the highest 90% when the soil was sterilized but not inoculated. So the third conclusion does not follow. So again we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Next we have a fourth conclusion. It does not follow because maximum growth was achieved when the soil was sterilized and inoculated. So it's a no again. So we put a no in front of this conclusion. Fifth conclusion does follow because the survival rate for seedlings that were neither grown in sterilized soil nor inoculated at 1 year is 28%, and the survival rate at 1.5 years is 25%, which means that some seedlings died more than 1 year after transplantation. So, the fifth conclusion does follow the statement of the question, so we will drag a yes and drop it in front of this conclusion. Next question we have that during a university presidential election, two candidates debated on three policy issues over the course of 3 weeks. The graph shows the student sentiment by way of unique tweets received on the university's online platform after each debate. So here we have this, you can see a graph, and then place yes if the conclusion does follow and place no if the conclusion does not follow. So first conclusion we have candidate B fared better in terms of invoking a response from the students. Conclusion second, students felt more strongly about transport issues at the university campus. Third one says that the students became increasingly critical of candidate A over the course of the 3 debates. Fourth one says library and internet usage at the university was the least priority concern of the students. Fifth one says the students became increasingly less engaged with the candidates during the course of the 3 debates. So here we have these 5 conclusions. So let's see which one does follow and which one does not. So the first conclusion that says candidate B fared better in terms of invoking a response from the students, it does not follow because all the bars are taller candidate A than candidate B. This means that candidate A was more successful in evoking a response from the students. So that's why we will drag a no and drop it here in front of this conclusion. Drag it here and then you can put it here like this. Second conclusion that says students felt most strongly about transport issues at the university campus, it does follow because the bars are tallest for the debate concerning transport policy. Therefore, it can be concluded that students felt more strongly about transport issues. So it does follow, that's why we will drag a yes and drop it here. The third one, the students became increasingly critical of candidate A over the course of the three debates. It does not follow because the height of the negative tweet bars for candidate A gradually decreases over the course of the three debates, which means that the students became less critical of candidate A over time. So this does not follow, so that's why we will drag a no and drop it here. Fourth conclusion, that says library and internet usage at the university was the least priority concern of the student. It does not follow because the hardship loan policy invoked the least response from the students. So this was the least priority concern of the students. So this conclusion does not follow. So again we will drag a no and drop it here. The fifth conclusion, it does follow because the height of the bars becomes progressively shorter while moving from the first to the third debate, which shows that the students become increasingly less engaged during the course of the three debates. So as you know, it does follow, so we will drag a yes and drop it here in front of this box. I think this is enough for today. We'll be back with another video to continue our next questions. So if you have any confusion, you can tell me in the comment section. I'll be back with another video. Till then, just take care and goodbye.